With each passing day, the polls move further and further in Donald Trump's favor all across the country, and especially in those swing states. Massive changes among the American electorate, non-white voters moving very rapidly towards Trump. And this is all bad news for Democrats and Joe Biden. But as they receive bad news and they become more desperate, do they become more dangerous? That's the conversation I want to have now with my next guest, the great Victor Davis Hanson, senior fellow at the Hoover Institute and the author of The Dying Citizen, How Progressive Elites, Tribalism, and Globalization Are Destroying the Idea of America. Sir, great to have you back with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
This is an interesting time. This seems like, Trump has one of the best hands he's ever had electorally heading into the 2024 election. Does it make you nervous when Democrats have this much control of our institutions, what they'll do to try to stop him?
Yeah, it does. You saw what they did in a minor incident, like the MSNBC, NBC hiring of Romney. And you can see that they don't feel that fair play or symmetry or reciprocity applies to them at all. So I think they're on a moral quest where any means necessary are justified by their superior moral end. Mm-hmm. That's true of them in general, but especially true with Donald Trump. I mean, they don't see anything wrong with Atita James tweeting and gloating about the increasing interest by the day in their way. It's just justified that Donald Trump is their enemy, and anything that hurts him is fine with them, regardless of the propriety or with the legality of it.
Anything goes. They talk so much about how much they love and respect democracy and want to fight for democracy, but when it comes down to it, actual ballots across the country, they have been fighting like crazy to preclude Donald Trump from appearing on those ballots. And the same is true, by the way, for third-party candidates like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The Biden campaign is undertaking an active effort right now to prevent RFK Jr. from appearing on ballots. So when they say the words democracy, what do they really mean?
Well, democracy for them just means kind of a referendum on a pre-decided or pre-selected or pre-agreed on agenda. And their way of thinking that the left should have permanent power and then it should be ratified every once in a while with an election. But when you look at, for them, it's always a process. I think the Republicans and conservatives are sort of naive. They don't understand. They think that everybody's open-minded and enlightened and they're going to make rational choices. But the Democrats are very cynical. So when they lose control of the Supreme Court, pack it, go to a justice's home, intimidate them at home, get out in front of the Supreme Court and threaten Gorsuch and Kavanaugh by name, as Schumer did. When they are unsure about the Senate, and then get rid of the filibuster if you're in the majority, or bring in 2 new states if you can. If the blue wall crumbles and suddenly the Electoral College is an enemy rather than a friend, it's get the National Voter Compact to nullify the Electoral College. And that's how they think. And you can see it for all their very wide views among the Democratic Party, but not really when it comes to discipline. The Republicans are all over the map. They can't even get a speaker. They get people that leave their office prematurely and endanger their tenuous hold on the House. Not the Democrats. If somebody's in surgery, they bring them out on a stretcher to vote. And it's that ideological discipline and rigor and intolerance that is really frightening. There's a long history on the left of doing that, but we never have quite seen it in a country like this before. Not with Carter, not with Clinton, not before like this.
Well, they're true believers for sure. I'm not sure if it's ideological belief so much as it is the belief in power on the left. Meanwhile, on the right, it feels like the true believers, the people who are in line with the voters, are unfortunately kind of few and far between. Is that your impression, that there's only a small number of Republicans who actually believe it?
I don't know. Sometimes the Republican Party, I don't know what it is, but they kind of sleepwalk through. They don't understand that all of our major institutions, from a Google search to the Super Bowl halftime to the major media, Silicon Valley, social media, New York Times, NPR, network news, foundations, corporate boardroom, academia, you name it, they're all overwhelmingly progressive, and the progressives see that they have a message that doesn't resonate. It's contrary to human nature. This redistributionist, totalitarian, take from one, give to another, let the government adjudicate. So people don't like that, but they historically they get it through the institutions. That so-called long march through the institutions, and the Republicans kind of wake up and they think, wow, the media is biased. Wow, entertainment and Hollywood are biased. Wow, even ESG is dominating the corporate boardroom, or gee whiz, DI is even in corporations now, and they're always a day late and a dollar short.
They kind of let it all happen to them. And then meanwhile, the left uses those institutions, as you point out, pretty effectively to advance their agenda and their talking points. An example of that was this weekend on 60 Minutes. There was a big Leslie Stahl interview where she was talking about disinformation in the United States, the big problem of disinformation. So many Americans believe lies. Why do they believe lies? And the expert to whom she went was a woman called Kate Starbird from the University of Washington, who's a so-called disinformation expert. What 60 Minutes did not disclose is that she's federally funded, that she's received millions of dollars in taxpayer money in order to lead censorship efforts against the American people by pushing the social media companies to censor Americans. She's also an advisor to the Department of Homeland Security on that very same effort, which is to try and stop so-called disinformation, misinformation, malinformation. And it goes right to your point, Victor Davis Hanson, where you've got the federal government, big media, non-governmental organizations, federal tax dollars, all moving in the same exact direction to advance the left's agenda while misleading the rest of us. And the right seems to just sit there with their hands in their pockets.
Yeah, I think they also have this idea that's very ossified. It's a calcified idea that the Republican Party is the party of the rich where all the money is. If you look at the top fortunes in the Fortune 400, or you look at zip codes or congressional districts by income, the Democratic Party is a bi-coastal elite that has most of the capital in the country, $9 trillion Silicon Valley alone in market capitalization. They have all of the wealthy elite endowments in the university. They have all of the foundations. And the Republican Party, it's good, but it's a middle-class, nationalist, populist movement now. And they should understand that it's being vastly outspent, not to mention the institutional disadvantages that it suffers from. So they perennially get outraised. I mean, in 2020, I think Trump was outspent 3.5 to 1. And that looks like it's going to be the same today. And they know that if Mark Zuckerberg decides that, he's going to put another $419 million in 2024 to absorb the work of the registrars, they're not going to be able to match that, or they're not even going to know what's going to happen. Under the guise of COVID, they just sort of sleepwalked and said, oh, Democrats are going to all key swing states, or changing the ballot laws. The result will be 30% at the election day polls, not 70% traditionally, and the error rate or the rejection rate of ballots will dive by a magnitude. Oh, that's just the way it goes. Yeah. And then the day after the election, they say, wow, we didn't have any idea of the effect of mail-in balloting.
Right. And money and election administration are huge, but you also, in the end, you do still need voters. And it seems to me that Republicans have one of the best opportunities of our entire lives. I'm not certain it's because of the work of Republicans so much as it is because of the failings of Democrats. But what do you make of the giant demographic shift we're seeing right now in the country? You kind of pointed it out, which is that you've got the richest people in the country who are all captured by Democrats. They're all supporting the Democrats. Meanwhile, the rest of us are all kind of moving in the direction of Republicans and really away from those Democrats who've become so radical.
Yeah, I live in a community out here in rural California. It's about 90% Mexican American. I've seen it gradually drift toward the center, if not the conservative, but now it's sudden. And it has a lot to do with the substitution of race or ethnic brand by class. By that I mean a lot of Latinos and blacks are looking at their elite the same way East Palestine looks at Palo Alto. That the white working class wised up about where Clinton and Obama were taking the Democratic Party, and they defected in the millions because the transgendered issue was not their issue. Abortion on demand was not their issue. appeasement was not their issue. Vast government spending was not their issue. But you're starting to see that now with the Latino and Black communities. They think, wait a minute, defunding the police made my life worse. My God, I have a lot of worries other than a third's biological sex. I need natural gas stove. I need cheap gas. I don't want to worry about some theoretical climate change guy at Berkeley or Princeton telling me that I've got to do this and do that. And so they're really looking at their own party elite, especially minority elites, and they're saying, Joy Reid doesn't have nothing in common with me. She's got a lot in common with her other anchor women, but nothing in common with me. And I think that's a radical shift of a class consciousness again, rather than just tribal consciousness. And it's going to help the Republicans a lot if they can capitalize on it. They should campaign in every state, inner city, barrio, and talk about class.
Yeah, it could help a lot. And the trends seem to indicate that men are moving more rapidly than women are. In fact,
that's absolutely true.
In fact, James Carville is being quoted pretty rampantly this week because he just did an interview, I believe, with it was the New York Times. He did it with the New York Times. He was talking about Democrats, and he was talking about how Biden has been bleeding black male voters. He said the following, quote, "A suspicion of mine is that there are too many preachy females dominating the culture of his party. Quote, don't drink beer, don't watch football, don't eat hamburgers. This is not good for you. The message is too feminine," said James Carville. "Everything you're doing is destroying the planet. You've got to eat your peas. If you listen to Democrat elites, NPR is my go-to place for that," he says. "The whole talk is about how women and women of color are going to decide this election." I'm like, well, 48% of the people that vote are males. Do you mind if they have some consideration? That was James Carville's assessment. He's getting a lot of backlash this week from people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. What do you make of his analysis here?
Well, he's right. I think he's a little naive because it's not just females; it's elite, arrogant males too, in those rarefied circles. People don't like to listen to them either, and you can start to see a little bit in California even that they don't like to see some person who gets on the television and says we're going to let 90% of all the snow melt out to the Pacific because of natural riparian considerations. When you're a Mexican American guy who drives a tractor and needs irrigation in August when it's 105, and they don't like the tone, they don't like the accent, they don't like the tone, they don't like the milieu, and they just don't like to be talked down to like they're stupid.
Yes.
And that's what the left does now. It's a party of the degree, the people with letters after their names, with a lot of money, with a lot of pretensions, and they're kind of hypocritical too. People think, well, they keep telling us that we have to pay this much for gas, this much for electricity, but then you look at them and they either have enough money to make themselves exempt, or they put their kids in private school, but they say unions are great for teachers, and they're starting to see that hypocrisy there's no better example than AOC. The way her personal taste, the way she lives, and the Marxist drivel that she promulgates is just such a disconnect that I don't think she resonates in the way that she used to either.
Well, I think you're tapping into the single most fundamental difference in terms of our political breakdown, which is on one side, you have people who think that there should be respect for the citizen. On the other, it's contempt for the governed. And I don't know, I don't know about, I can't speak for everybody, but I know when I'm being patronized, when I'm being treated with contempt, I recoil. I absolutely hate it. And you're indicating that there's a lot of people who feel the same way.
Yeah, I mean, by all means, people can't figure out Trump because he can be crude, he can be mean, he makes a lot of gaffes, but one thing he isn't is inauthentic. So when he has that Queen's accent, he wears that tie, whether he's with workers or poor people, he is what he is, and he doesn't pander to people. He just says it. And sometimes what he says is self-destructive and hurts the cause, but there's one thing that the left is fearful of him, and he's a billionaire that resonates with the lower middle classes only because he's authentic. It's not so much as his agenda they like, but even his agenda reflects sort of a empathy. He always says we're going to protect our farmers, our soldiers, our frackers. You never hear that from Biden or the left. It's you're a clinger, irredeemable, chump, dregs. We're going to shut down coal. You're going to have to learn to code. Trump has been very good on that. He doesn't lecture people on what they have to do.
Yeah,
He
doesn't roll up his
them.
he doesn't roll up his sleeves and put a cowboy hat on and pretend he's a farmer.
No,
He's always in the same
doesn't-
outfit.
He doesn't change his accent like Hillary or Obama either. He doesn't do that.
No.
And he
All
doesn't
right.
do what Joe Biden does, whisper and all that stuff. He is what he is.
Yeah, and people can smell it. Victor Davis Hanson, thank you as always. I really appreciate our conversations. Always nice having you on with me. Thank you, sir.